Those headphones are loud.
Oh, they are super loud.
I can hear
Turn it down.
Yeah, I can literally hear it from here. There we go. Who's in there with Jason? Is it your last date? What did you want? What was your last meal request? That was weird. Sounded like... What day are you supposed to be executed? Tap.
Let's see what else is going on. I'm bored. I'm not scary. Should I know? Where?
For decoupaging, less is more. You don't need very much product. Just put a real light coat on and then just place your napkin down exactly where you want it. Tap it down with your fingers to get all the bubbles and wrinkles out and just have fun with it. And look how cute this turned out. Just blended in perfectly with that graphic, and the lid just finished it off perfectly. Today we're going to do some DIY stained glass or color tint or dye some glass jars and bottles. This is what you're going to need to do the project. I've got some paper towel, some tinfoil lined cookie sheet. I've got some skewers that I broke in half, so I just need the half of them. Some little plastic jars to mix our solution up in, and assorted glass jars, and some food coloring. I'm using some gel food coloring. You can also use the liquid also. And this one's nice because it's already in pre-mixed colors. And some Elmer's school glue. I love doing these glass jars in all the different colors. The first one I'm going to work on is one of these mason jars. You want to make sure you have an area where you can keep everything kind of neat and clean because it will stain with the food coloring. So I have a piece of tin foil, and then I'm just going to put a piece of paper towel on top of it so when we drain it out it can catch onto the paper towel and not make a mess. I'm going to be using the Elmer's school glue. Now there isn't really an actual measurement to this. You just kind of want to mix up enough that you think is going to be good for your project. And when I'm using the school glue, I don't like to dilute it with any water. I find it sticks to the jar better without it being diluted. If you're using Mod Podge, which also works perfect for this project, you might want to kind of water it down a little bit because I do find that it is a little bit thicker and doesn't run as well over the bottle as the Elmer's glue does. So I'm just adding my food coloring until I get the desired color that I want. You want to make sure that you're using quite a bit. You want quite a dark color because as this dries, it's going to lighten. So by making it darker, you'll know that you're going to have it the right color when you're finished this project. So I'm going to add, I think, a little bit more. And you just kind of do it until you're happy with the color. And all of this food coloring is just in my craft room. I don't use it for my cooking. It was just bought just for crafts. Okay, so this is a really good color, nice dark blue. And now we're ready to put it in the jar. Now while you're mixing up this color, you can preheat your oven. We're going to preheat the oven to 175 to 200 so it's nice and hot and ready for when we're finished with these jars so we can bake them. And I'm just going to dump the mixture right into the glass jar. This is really a simple, easy DIY, and it creates beautiful tinted stained glass, and you can do it in all kinds of different colors for every season, and they look perfect.
I need to find the best way to learn math and science.
It's brilliant.
Whoa.
Here's a new way to learn math, science, and computer science that's fun and interactive. On Brilliant, you'll learn by seeing concepts visually and interacting with them, not just by watching videos. Check out courses.
I've got it swirled around, completely covered on the inside, and now I'm just going to set it on the paper towel and let it drip down and make sure that it's all completely covered really well. Now I'm going to do a yellow one in this little jar. So once again, we're just going to measure out the glue to approximately what you think will cover the glass, add the food coloring, and swirl it around. And again, make sure you add lots of color because it's going to dilute the color as it dries. So maybe mix a color that you think you wanted and then just add a little touch more, and that will probably be the color that you want. This one's going to be really pretty, this nice and vibrant yellow. Got this all swirled around. We're ready to put it upside down and let it drain off. Now, when you're doing these, they're never going to be perfect. You're always going to have the odd streak or the odd bubble there. I actually really like that because then it makes it look like it's old and vintage and not brand new. And now I'm going to do some green. I'm going to do the 6 different colors so I can show you how they all look when they're finished and how vibrant and beautiful they can be even all together. Just going to add the green food coloring, and I'm not going to show you my fingers because I'm already covered in. I probably should have put some gloves on, but that's not the way I roll. I always like to have a big mess, as you know, but this will stain, so if you don't want to get your fingers all different colors, then put some gloves on. So I'm just mixing up this beautiful green color. I want it to be quite a dark, so I'm going to add a bit more, and then we're ready to put it in the bottle and swirl it around. And the green one's done, and I'm just gonna put it upside down and let it drain also. I love this little bottle with the cork, and I think I want to make it amber. Awesome. So I'm going to mix up some brown and make a really pretty amber color for this. Dump in what I think I need for the project. Get a little skewer. Scoop it into the glue. And like I said before, if you have some Elmer's glue, you can use that. You can also use the Elmer's glue clear. It works really well. And you can also use Mod Podge. But like I said before, I find the Mod Podge is a little bit thicker, so you might want to water it down a little bit with a little tiny bit of water when you're doing this technique. And I found with this glue, you didn't need to.
Awesome, she's playing with some music.
Now I'm going to do pink. The nice thing about this set of all the different gel colors is they're already mixed into specific colors. If you're getting the little food coloring that has just the 4 different colors, you'll have to mix and match. Get your color chart out to mix the colors that you want. That's what I like about this one. This one's already mixed to pink and you can use it right away. Now the one thing that I will mention with this is not permanent. This is just glue and food coloring, so you can't do this process and then fill it with water and put flowers in it or something like that. It'll just peel right off the jar. This is just for decor purposes only, and if you do it and you don't like the way that it turned out, soak it in some really hot soapy water and get a scrub brush, and it'll all come back and you can start from scratch again. Now this one, I kind of didn't mix the glue in probably well enough with the food coloring, and it's got a little bit of a textured color to it, so it might turn out a little bit streaky, but that's okay. I don't mind that look, and we're just gonna roll with it. Last bottle, I'm going to do this one, and I'm going to do it in red, and I'm going to mix it all up, swirl it around, and then we'll be ready to put these all in the oven and let them bake.
I love the elevator music.
The other thing that I should mention before I put these in the oven is these have to be really super clean before you do this. If there's any grease or grime on the inside, the paint and the food coloring will not stick to it, and you'll end up having a blob in your glass where it hasn't attached. So give it a really good scrub in a soapy sink full of water, and even an alcohol wipe to wipe out the inside would help too. I've got these all done. My oven's preheated, and I'm ready to take it down and put it on the oven, and I can't wait to see how these turn out. And wearing gloves would have been a perk also. The oven is preheated to 175. I've put them on a tinfoil lined cookie sheet, and we're just going to leave them in there for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to rotate them over the other side, and we're going to just keep doing that back and forth until they're completely dry, and you'll know they're dry when they're translucent. Now they're all done. It probably took about a half an hour in the oven, and putting them up and down and reversing them every 5 minutes to get them dry. They all turned out really well, except for this blue one, and I think I know what happened. It probably had a little bit of residue on the inside, and it wasn't sticking, and you can see how it kind of bubbled up, and it didn't work. And sometimes this can be a little bit of a tricky process, so I just wanted to show you that not all the time does it always work out perfect, but I'm going to wash this one out and probably redo the blue over again, but the other ones turned out perfect, and I love them. And I'm just going to show you, you can see how easy it is to redo it. This kind of just peels right out, and you can retry it again. So I'm going to do this one again, but I'm going to make sure that I really, really clean it really well. I probably didn't use enough of an alcohol wipe to get any grease or grime. Maybe it had some sort of a greasy food in it before, and that's why it didn't adhere. But I just want to update you guys on that in case that does happen to you. They're all finished, and I love them, and probably the amber is my favorite color. Let me know down in the comments which one's your favorite. I got 3 upcycled glass bottles and jars that I've saved, and I'm going to show you how I paint them with no chipping, no peeling, and it works fantastic. I've scrubbed these all in hot soapy water down in my kitchen sink, and now I'm going to wipe them down with the rubbing alcohol. This is so important because a lot of these jars have greasy food or residue on the inside and the outside that will prevent the paint from sticking. Don't skip this step.
I'll check if I muted it. Make sure.
Now, this is a step that I've just recently added, and I find it makes a really big difference. You can just paint chalk paint on your glass jars, and it sticks really well. Never had a lot of problems, but if you want it to really, really stick and have absolutely 0 problems, I like to use either a flat white spray paint, or if you have any spray primer, this works even better. Give it a little tiny spritz. You don't need to cover your whole jar. Just give it a spritz, just enough, just to give it a little bit of a coat, and that's a fantastic base to start your painting. I'm going to take this out to my shed and give all 3 of these a little spritz. I've taken this outside into my shed, and you can see I've just given it like a really light spritz. You don't need very much. It doesn't have to be covered completely. Just enough for the paint to adhere to it.
Inside or out?
We're now ready to start painting. I am just using my homemade white chalk paint. I'll put a link down below in the description so you can make some for yourself. I find it works really well painting glass. I'm just going to do the bottoms first, and then we'll paint the sides. Our bottoms are all dry, Now we're going to use our brush and paint on a good coat on all the bottles. You don't want to put it on too thick. You want a light coat, and this little chip brush works fine for this process. First coat is completely on. Huge tip. Do not put your second coat on until these are completely dry. Really, really dry. That's important. If you try to paint on your second coat before the first coat is completely dry, it's going to lift off. So we're going to set it aside and let it dry completely.
You see how listening to somebody else that knows better than you can actually be a benefit? Sometimes it is wise to remember that that's why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Only one. Really, is to eat. But as we drink. There we go.
Ready for the second coat. I like to brush on the second coat again. If you found you had really good coverage with the first coat, you can go to the third coat where I like to sponge it on. But I'm going to put a second coat on. I just find it covers better, and you can just see how your paint works for you. Our second coat is completely dry, and you can tell that it's really adhered to the glass. But when you're using the brush, you can see stroke marks. So our last coat, always like to use a sponge and dab it on. Our coat that we put on with the sponge is all completely dry now, and as you can see, I'm scrubbing really hard. This is not coming off. It bonds really, really well. That's how easy it is to paint glass and have it look nice and smooth and ready for your DIY project. This is such a fantastic technique because it works on clear glass. A lot of transfer methods don't work well on clear glass, and when you try to do it, they rub off. You just don't have really great results. With this method, it works fantastic. For this technique, you're going to need this paper that's shiny underneath. I found these label sheets at the thrift store. They work fantastic. You can also use address label sheets. Take off the stickers. That's what we're going to use. I am now going to go and upload my image that I want to use into Google Docs, size it.
This is your brain when you're struggling to focus. And this is your brain when you're in the zone. But getting in the zone and staying there, that feels more like luck than something you can control. So that's why we made Brain FM. It's like a do not disturb setting for your mind, and it gets you focused.
Print on the shiny side. Now this technique will only work with a laser jet printer. You won't have very good results with an inkjet. I've printed it off, and now we're going to use clear shelf liner that you can pick up at the dollar store. Now we're going to cut the graphic off that sheet of paper a little bit bigger than the actual size of the graphic, and make sure that you're not touching the ink because it will rub off. And then cut a piece of that shelf liner the exact same size as that transfer. I have 3 projects in this video using this technique, and make sure you stick through right to the end because they all turned out absolutely adorable. Peel off that shelf liner and then really carefully center it over that graphic, making sure not to move it. You only have one chance. Lay it down, flatten out all the bubbles and wrinkles, and then I like to use my Cricut scraper, or you can use some sort of a credit card, and really press that shelf liner right into that graphic. Once you've really got all the bubbles and wrinkles out of it, you're going to trim around the edges, and then we're going to prep our project. I like using some rubbing alcohol. This is just a candle that I found at the thrift store. It hadn't been used yet, so it was brand new, and it's in that clear glass jar. Now comes the magic. You've peeled that shelf liner off that piece of paper. The graphic stays on it, and you have created a transfer that you can put on any clear glass projects. And isn't this absolutely fantastic? And you can just imagine the possibilities. You can custom make these. I was thinking as I was making them how beautiful they would be for a wedding or baby showers or customized gifts for the holidays. Okay, for this transfer, I am going to do it on a wine bottle that I got out of my recycling bin. Same thing. And now we're going to decoupage some napkins around that graphic. How they're pretty. And then we're just going to set it aside and let it completely dry. Okay, now we're waiting for this to dry. I would like to make a graphic for the front of it with my Cricut, so we're gonna go ahead and do that. Okay, I want to make a spooky Halloween graphic for this candle holder. So I'm going to go into upload. I have a graphic that I made. It says spooky. I'm going to add that to my canvas. And this is available in my Etsy store. If you're interested in purchasing it, you can grab it. Make sure you use the code SAVE50. You get 50% off all of my graphics. And I'm just going to size it. We're in Canada, so it's centimeters. So I'm going to start at 5 centimeters. I think I want it a little bit bigger. So we're just going to pull it a little bit bigger. Now we're going to make it. I'm doing it on a mat because I'm using a scrap piece of vinyl that I had. I'm going to press done. And then we're going to press continue. Everything looks good and it's connecting with my Explorer 3. And I am using Smart Vinyl Removable. Click on that. And it's sending all the information to the cutting machine. While we're waiting for this to dry, I'm going to put the graphic on it. And I love this little hack. I just have a lint roller and I just press my jar exactly where I want it so it's laying flat and it doesn't roll around and it's easier to put the graphic on. So we're just going to peel off the transfer tape and we're ready to put it exactly where I want it on the jar. This is such an easy DIY, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't tried the polyacrylic sealer and the glitter on the inside of glass jars, give it a try because it's so cool. You can use so many different colors of glitter and make it different bottles for different holidays. First upcycling project involves turning a wooden stand, possibly used for plants, into a basic stool. To begin with, I'm going to measure the legs and make them slightly shorter so they're going to be more of a better length to sit on. After measuring, I'm going to use my jigsaw to cut the legs and ensure that they're all the same length. I was really excited when I had a friend show up with this plant stand because I visioned a stool right away. I'm also going to save those ends that I've cut off because I can put those to use in another project. The paint on this stand almost feels like it might have been enamel based. I probably could have used a paint stripper, but I felt like I wanted to spend a whole bunch of time sanding today, so I put on my 80 grit sandpaper and went to work, and it took a lot of sanding, but I love the results. I see stools like this with really high price tags at high-end stores, so I'm really excited that I'm able to recreate this from a thrift store find for a fraction of the price. To achieve a weathered and aged appearance, I'm going to be using a variety of different tools, such as a chain, hammer, putty knife, some pliers, to distress that wooden surface. By intentionally adding these dings and dents and worn corners, I'm aiming to create a farmhouse-like aesthetic that suggests that the piece has been around for over a century. I'm also going to use my utility knife to cut chunks out of the wood here. And while this process may not be for the faint of heart, I assure you the end result's going to be worth it. Once I achieved all of that desired texture, I'm going to go over the wood with an 80 grit sander to smoothen out all those notches, chunks, and preserve that aged look. After completing all the sanding, it's time to apply some wax for that finishing touch. Now here's a little twist. I'm going to use some of my leftover shoe polish from another project as the top coat for this stool. I have some black and clear shoe polish, and I'm going to mix them together to create a shade that's not overly dark. I'm going to apply that shoe wax, and it's going to provide a durable, permanent finish on the stool. As I rub it in, all the wax is going to seep into those notches and dings, and it's going to accentuate them, adding that even more to that aged look. It's the perfect final touch. And if you don't have shoe polish, don't worry, you can use your regular finishing wax to achieve the same results. Personally, I'm absolutely in love with how it turned out. This stool is finding a special place in my kitchen, right where it belongs.
And she just guaranteed that nobody was ever going to take that stool from her. I think that's ugly. Ugly. That's ugly. No, it looks, I mean, she got the look she wanted. Nobody's ever gonna want to
For
buy
my
that
next
store.
project, I'm rummaging through my junk drawer in search of 4 old doorknobs. I have this wonderful idea to repurpose them along with a piece of salvaged wood into a fun DIY coat rack. Interestingly, these doorknobs were given to me by a friend who knew I could create something beautiful with them. So here's my take on it. To start, I'm sanding down that salvaged wood using a 120 grit sandpaper to remove all of that outdated varnish. I always ask my friends to save unique items instead of throwing them away. They know I love upcycling and transforming discarded items into something beautiful, and it's my way of reducing waste and avoiding filling up landfills. Instead of burning or wasting these items, I'm giving them a new life and purpose. Did you know you can create a cost-effective wood stain by just mixing instant coffee with hot water? It's a simple solution that works wonders for staining your DIY projects. Try it out and you might be amazed by the results. To attach the doorknobs to the piece of wood, I'm going to be using a product called JB Weld Steel Stick. It's a putty that you mix together, and once it hardens, it provides a secure bond. I also have double-ended screws that are going to fit perfectly into the doorknobs. Here's how it works. I'm going to quickly mold that steel stick, ensuring it's a consistent color and blended in and mixed well. Then you're going to insert it into the bottom opening on that doorknob. After that, I'll place the screw into the putty, and as it dries, the putty will act like cement, permanently fixing that screw to the doorknob. And this is going to allow us to securely attach those doorknobs to that salvaged piece of wood.
Guys, I know nothing about lighting.
I enlisted the help of my husband because, well, let's just say Patience and I aren't best friends, especially when it comes to measurements. With his guidance, we marked the 4 spots where each doorknob was going to be placed on the wood, and then I made a small test pilot hole to ensure that it was going to screw in easy. Now, all that's left is to screw in those doorknobs and attach them securely to the wood. Before proceeding, I let these doorknobs sit overnight to make sure that they were dry fully before we screwed them in. Important to remember that everything in this project was obtained for free. The salvaged wood was discovered in a pile of discarded pieces, and the doorknobs were generously given to me by a friend. These doorknobs are truly stunning with their unique weathering and patina. I'm grateful that I can bring these materials together and transform what would otherwise have been waste into something truly beautiful. This coat rack is headed to my cabin. It's going to be a perfect addition, and it's going to complement that decor. Try to recreate that red, and I had this red in my cabinet and it matched pretty good, so I'm going to paint all of those wooden steps with the red paint. For the frame of this step ladder, I had completely dry, and we're going to put it all back together. And here's how I upcycled it. A beautiful spot to keep some of my potted plants.
Awesome.
Thrift stores often have an overwhelming number of picture frames, and it can be a challenge to find the perfect one. But taking the time to sort through them is worth it. Recently, I found a beautiful wooden frame that caught my eye. Although it didn't like the print in the middle, I decided to upcycle it. First, I used a scuff pad to remove any imperfections that were on the wood, giving it that rustic look. And then I printed a graphic from my Etsy store on my laser printer. I'm going to give it a vintage touch, and I think it's going to blend better with the frame with a coffee stain. I love the primitive farmhouse style, but feel free to add your own twist on any of these techniques that suits your decor. Coffee staining is a simple way to give plain paper a rustic vintage look. All you need is some instant coffee and some warm water and a sponge. Just dab the mixture all over the print, ensuring that it covers the paper evenly. And then I like to use a heat gun because it dries it really quick and we can get crafting faster. This method is perfect for creating a fast, charming, coffee-stained effect on all of your papers, and it's going to work great for this project. I'm going to attach that print with some Mod Podge. I've got my Mod Podge mat, and I'm just spreading it out over top of that print that was there before. Now, I couldn't pull it out. It had been glued down previously, so it's going to stay put. I'm not going to make a mess trying to rip it out, and I'm just going to glue right on top of it. And if you don't have any Mod Podge in your stash, you can make some homemade Mod Podge. I have a fantastic recipe for that. I'll put the link down below in the description, or you can just use any type of crafting glue. And then to finish it off, I want to seal it up again with that Mod Podge mat. And I'm kind of stippling it on because it gives that old look to the paper, like an old oil painting. What a fantastic thrift store find at such a reasonable price. I might have overlooked it if I hadn't caught my eye amongst all of the sea of frames. So take your time, look through the frames, and you might be surprised what you find. I love this one. What do you think? At the thrift store for scrap wood pieces like this, or when you're out yard selling, you might find some hidden gems. These wooden scraps won't last long because they have great potential for various DIY projects, so keep an eye out for these as they tend to sell. I stumbled upon poor little Josh's toolbox tucked away in the back corner of the thrift store surrounded by tools. It immediately caught my attention and I knew I had to bring it home. However, I had to give it a personal touch and make it fit my decor. So I grabbed my 80 grit sandpaper and I gently sanded that entire toolbox to remove all of the lettering. After sanding down all that lettering, I rummaged through my paint stash and I found a red paint that actually matched almost perfectly with the existing color on the toolbox. I felt like it was fate, as if the project was meant to be. I applied a light coat of that paint all over the toolbox to blend everything together seamlessly. While thrift store shopping, remember to pay attention to the items that may seem outdated or easily overlooked. This little toolbox had likely been sitting there for quite a while, just waiting for someone to give it some love. With just a little bit of paint and some sanding, I transformed it beautifully. It's amazing what a small effort can do to breathe new life into neglected items. Instead of using this toolbox as intended, I'm going to give it a twist and turn it into a towel holder. I'm going to attach some sawtooth hangers to the back and making sure that they're even and level, ensuring that they're positioned just right. And with a few screws, the hangers are going to be securely That you often find in the thrift store. They're quite common, but don't always match
Especially
today's
after
styles,
Easter.
especially with that orange or dark stain. The handles are another issue, not quite appealing. However, removing them with a simple pair of pliers or snips is really easy. Usually the handles on wicker baskets are just pushed into place and not tightly woven in, so removing them is really easy. Next, grab a large Rubbermaid tote and fill it with warm water and add some bleach. And you can just adjust this to how much you want to bleach out your wicker baskets. Submerge them into the mixture, ensuring that they stay in place by adding a rock or something heavy, and then set them aside and let them soak overnight to work their magic. Bleaching the wicker baskets lightens the color as intended. However, the effectiveness may vary depending on the basket's material. This square basket, it responded really well. Well, this other red one, it's a really strong color to remove. So it's a little bit of trial and error, but certainly worth a try. Now that the basket no longer has a dated appearance, I can fill it up with some of my other DIY projects, and I think it looks absolutely fabulous. Use up a whole bunch of scrap stuff that I've had in my shed forever. An old drawer, a teapot with a missing lid, and a door handle. I'm going to take the handle off the drawer that was there already, and I'm going to paint the drawer with some of my crackle paint using the Elmer's glue. I'm going to spread that glue all over that drawer, and then we're going to paint some chalk paint on top of it, and as it dries, you're going to see some wonderful cracks show up all throughout the paint. Once it's completely dried, I had some stain, and I'm going to put the stain over top of the crackle paint. It's just going to age it and give it more of a vintage look. I'm replacing the knob that was on there with this knob so we have a place to hang the drawer when it's all finished. I'm going to tape off the inside of that teapot. I've taken it outside and I'm spraying it with this lovely spray paint. Now the teapot's completely dry, I'm going to take that tape out from the inside and we're going to attach it to the top of that drawer. I'm using this old door pull and I'm going to screw it into the top of the drawer, attaching the teapot. I found this plaque at the dollar store and it's had a piece of paper decoupaged on it. I'm going to rip off that decoupage and get it cleaned down right to the wood, and we're going to turn it into a sign. And to make the sign, we're going to use the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. I designed these graphics, printed it off on my LaserJet printer, made sure to reverse the text. I've painted that little plaque with a couple coats of my homemade chalk paint. I sanded it, distressed it, and then put the graphics on. And now it's been 24 hours. I dampened the paper, rubbed it off, and it's all set. I wanted to age that teapot a little bit, so I took some 80 grit sandpaper and just went around the edges so it looked a little bit more old and vintage. Had this piece of chain that I'm going to loop onto the top. This spindle that was cut in half is going to go on the bottom. Hang tight with me, this is super cute. This is what I turned it into. A fun little birdhouse. The teapot acts as a little house for the birds to go in. Home sweet home. The little spindle they can perch on. How cute is that? This project, I had this old rusty toolbox in my shed forever, full of little bits and pieces. I cleaned it out because I knew what I wanted to use. Graphic transfer method. I designed these graphics, printed it off on my LaserJet printer, made sure to reverse the text. I've painted that little plaque with a couple coats of my homemade chalk paint. I sanded it, distressed it, and then put the graphics on. And now it's been 24 hours. I dampened the paper, rubbed it off, and it's all set. I wanted to age that teapot a little bit, so I took some 80 grit sandpaper and just went around the edges so it looked a little bit more old and vintage. Had this piece of chain that I'm going to loop onto the top. This spindle that was cut in half is going to go on the bottom. Hang tight with me, this is super cute. This is what I turned it into. A fun little birdhouse. The teapot acts as a little house for the birds to go in. Home sweet home. The little spindle they can perch on. How cute is that? This project, I had this old rusty toolbox in my shed forever, full of little bits and pieces. I cleaned it out because I knew what I wanted to use it for. I went to the hardware store, got some small nuts and bolts because I'm going to attach some brackets onto this toolbox. I drilled 2 holes in each side to attach the brackets, and then we're going to use the nuts and the bolts to attach it. I also put 2 holes in the bottom of the toolbox in case it ever gets any water or anything in it, because I'm going to put this outside so the water can drain out. I'm going to clean it up really well, take the sticker off that was on it, put a couple holes in the back so we can attach it to my shed. I've put a block of wood on my shed because we want to be able to open up the door of that toolbox when it's mounted and there's enough room at the back. And this is what I created with 2 brackets. I attached the toolbox, and now I have a catch-all toolbox on the outside of my shed for all of my gardening tools. This poor little vase has been in my shed for probably since last Halloween. I painted it orange. Not liking it right now. I had this cement color oops paint that I found at Home Depot. I turned it into some sand paint, and I'm going to paint over that orange paint with this gray sand paint, and it almost gives it a cement look. So I've turned this orange little pot into this beautiful cement looking planter for my patio.
No.
This is adorable. It was a little bit rusty, so I cleaned it all off, gave it a little bit of a sand, and now I'm painting it with my homemade chalk paint. Once it's completely dry, we're going to put some graphics on with the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. I love this graphic, Farm Life, and I think it's really fitting for this shovel. I'm going to cut it in half because there's that little bit of the dip in the shovel, and I want the graphics to be able to form around it. Applied the Mod Podge, put it where I wanted it, let it sit for 24 hours, and then we're going to rub off the paper. Now, a little tip when you're doing projects like this, if you don't want the rust to leach through again, you can always use a spray primer first and then the chalk paint on top of it. I didn't use the primer because I'm okay if the rust does leach through. I sealed it up really well with some engine enamel because it's going to be out in the elements, and I think this is perfect to put out in the garden at the farm. You can just stick the end of the shovel into a bucket full of flowers, and it's adorable. For this next project, all I used was an old colander that I found at the thrift store, a piece of a spindle, and a wooden ring. I'm going to drill 4 holes in the colander evenly across the top of it, and then we're going to use some twine and measure it out to the length that we need to where we want to hang it. Once it's all measured out, we're going to attach it to that wooden ring and tie it to the colander. I wanted to give it a little bit of character, so I drilled a hole through that spindle, had a piece of wire, and I'm going to attach it to the bottom of the colander. So I've taken a colander and a spindle and a little bit of twine, and I've made it into a really adorable plant hanger that you can put on your porch, and the little dangly spindle on the bottom finishes it off completely. Another thing that I always save from the scrap metal bin are ends of rakes. They turn into really great projects to make into coat hangers or to hang jewelry from. And this one I'm going to put together with a bunch of scrap wood. I had this piece of wood, I think it came off an old antique table. I sealed it up with some penetrating oil, and I had this old chippy piece of baseboard that I'm going to add onto the bottom. I sealed it up with some matte polyacrylic sealer so the paint wouldn't chip off anymore, put on some Gorilla Glue, and I'm going to nail it onto the bottom of that piece of wood. Now, I have no idea where this little bracket came from or what it was off of, but my rake fit perfect into it to hang. So I'm going to screw it into that piece of wood, and then we're going to put the rake into it, and it'll hold it in place. And this was what I was able to create with a bunch of junk. An old rake, a piece off of a table, an old piece of baseboard, and it's a beautiful piece to hang in an entranceway to keep your keys, or you can keep it in the kitchen and hang some utensils on it. It's gorgeous. Let's make a sign for the garden with a scrap piece of pine. I want to make it look old and vintage, so I'm taking a hammer, really dinging it all around the edges and anywhere where it would have naturally aged. Then I'm taking some stain, and I'm going to stain that board completely. It's going to soak into all those little nooks and crannies that we created with the hammer. I just love being able to take a new piece of wood and make it look old and vintage and rustic. Next, we're going to put on a coat of black homemade chalk paint. All these steps might seem like a lot of work, but in the end, it's taking a plain piece of wood and making it look more authentic and making it look better when it's turned into a sign. We're now going to do a crackle paint technique on this. I'm using my Elmer school glue and I'm pouring a generous amount on top of that paint after it's dried. We're going to spread that glue all over that piece of wood. And then once we have the glue spread out, we're going to let it sit for about a minute. We want it to start to get a little bit tacky. It's all ready now. We're going to take our homemade chalk paint and in long strokes from one end to the other, we're going to paint on top of that glue while it is still tacky. And you'll see as that paint dries, it's going to create a crackle finish that looks fantastic and authentic and old. It's completely dry now. I'm going to sand around the edges and we're ready to turn this into a sign. I've printed my graphic off on regular computer paper, sizing it to my project, and then we're going to apply it onto that wood with some Mod Podge. This process will also work with an inkjet printer. I have lots of tutorials comparing the inkjet against the LaserJet on my YouTube channel. You can check that out if you want. You're going to put a light amount of that Mod Podge over the graphic. This product that I'm using is exactly like Mod Podge. I couldn't find Mod Podge when I was looking for it, and this works just as well. I bought this one at Michael's from Deco Art.
Michael's!
You have to make sure when you're doing this technique that you reverse your text. If you don't, when you make your sign, your letters will be backwards. It's 24 hours later. I let it dry completely, and now I've got a rag with a little bit of water on it, and I'm dampening the paper so the graphics just start to show through. And then I'm using my fingers and we're rubbing away all of that paper. And as we do that, the graphics are going to stay on our sign, the paper is going to rub off, and it's that easy to make a sign with Mod Podge. I'm going to hang this out in my garden, so I need something to hang it from. I'm drilling a couple holes in the top, and I'm going to put through some twine, tie it nice and tightly, and then we're going to seal it up with some polyacrylic sealer. This is an outdoor formula because it's going to be out in the elements, and I want my sign to last for a long time. If you're making signs and they're going to be inside, you can buy the water-based polyacrylic sealer for indoors and it works perfect. So that's how easy it is to create your own signs with a little bit of Mod Podge, computer paper, and a piece of wood. What do you think?
Awesome.
This might be one of my favorite signs that I've ever made. I made this sign in one of my very first videos when I first started my YouTube channel, and I just love it, and I know some of you probably haven't seen it, so I wanted to share it. This is a piece of salvaged wood from a table. It's an actual table leg, and I'm going to decoupage a beautiful floral napkin onto it. A little trick when you're decoupaging and you're putting more than one napkin on, always like to rip the end that you're going to match the next napkin up with, and it just helps it blend in better. When I do projects like this, it always makes me feel better for not getting rid of all those bits and pieces that I saved. The table legs, the spindles, the old rusty bits and pieces, because one day I always put together something that's absolutely beautiful just from junk.
Junk, junk, junk. From junk to treasure.
Once it was all dry, I took it outside and I sanded all around the edges and got rid of all that leftover napkin, and it blended it in beautifully. And now we're going to seal it up with some outdoor polyacrylic sealer. And we're going to use the same technique again, the reverse technique. I use this, like I said before, for almost everything. It's so affordable and easy to do. It sometimes takes a little bit of practice to get the feel of rubbing off the paper, but once you get the hang of it, it works fantastic. You don't have the cost of the vinyl if you're using a Cricut, and with a stencil, you're limited to what signs you can make unless you buy all kinds of stencils. With this, you just download your graphic, print it, and make a sign. I want to hang my sign to the table leg. I've got these fence staples, you can find them at the hardware store, and this gold chain, and I'm going to attach the two together. And the sign is all ready for the paper to be rubbed off. And we're going to seal it up with our polyacrylic sealer. I had two of these table legs. I made a vintage garden and the fresh flowers, and I absolutely adore them. That floral napkin looked perfect on the legs, and the signs
Nice.
finished them off.
Really
I've got a
nice.
lot of signs that I'm showing you today because there's so many ideas of stuff that you can make for your outdoor decor or your garden. This one is made on a piece of pallet wood, and I'm going to make a flower market sign. I've sized the graphics to fit on this piece of pallet wood, and we're ready to use the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. A free piece of pallet wood made beautiful. This is a fun one. I did this one recently with pallet wood and cling wrap. And it's just a painting technique that's really great to do with kids and lots of fun. Get out all of your acrylic paint, all the different colors, and we're gonna mix and match. And we're just gonna drop paint here and there on the board. Doesn't matter, this is just for fun. And it doesn't matter if it's messy or if you get too much in one place and not enough in another. It'll all turn out perfect. And then you're going to get a piece of saran wrap or cling wrap and lay it right into that paint. And this is where it's lots of fun with kids. Just let them use their fingers and blend all of that paint in together. And just keep blending until you get the color that you like. And when you're blending 2 or 3 colors together, you're making other colors. It's just so much fun. And these are beach and pool themed. I'm doing a beach sign, and I'm doing a hello summer sign. Love the way that they turned out. The first project that I'm going to work on is this pitchfork. I actually got this pitchfork quite a while ago from the dump. Dug it out, brought it home, and I painted it back then with some chalk paint, and it started to weather a little bit, so I'm going to refresh it with some of my homemade chalk paint, and I'm going to put a really pretty graphic on it. Okay, my chalk paint has completely dried, and now I'm going to put this welcome graphic on it. If you've been following my channel, you know I love my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer to put on my graphics, and that's what I'm going to use for this project. I've printed off this graphic on my LaserJet printer. Make sure you reverse your text if you want to do a project like this, just on regular computer paper. And all the graphics that I'm using today in all 3 of my projects are available in my Etsy store. I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat, and I'm just going to put a light coat over the whole graphic. Make sure you're covering the whole piece of paper, and then I'm going to flip it over and center it where I want it on my pitchfork, and then rub any wrinkles or bubbles out so it's nice and smooth. I have quite a few tutorials on my channel that go really into depth into this method. If you want to learn how to do it, I'll put a link down below in the description, so you can go back and you can watch those, and I'll show you a more thorough step-by-step tutorial. Now, my graphic has completely dried. I've let it sit overnight, and I'm just taking a damp rag and I'm just wetting that paper just so you can start to see those graphics through, and then I'm going to rub off the paper, and you're left with a really pretty graphic.
Almost done with this
I've
roll.
sealed it up with some outdoor polyacrylic sealer, and look how cute this is. These look so cute, propped up on your porch, some flowers around them for a farmhouse feel. Old milk can that I have had on my porch for quite a while. The paint has faded on it, so I'm going to refresh it. I'm going to put on a coat of my homemade black chalk paint over the entire milk can. And I'm going to put a customized graphic on this of our last name and the year that we were established. I'm going to make my graphic the size of a piece of paper. So I'm putting this on just as a guide so I can tape off the area that I want to paint with some white chalk paint. And if you want to do a project like this, make sure you use some good painter's tape so the paint doesn't bleed through when you paint it on. So now that I have all the tape on, I'm going to peel that piece of paper away, and I have a perfect square the same size as a piece of paper. And I'm just going to take my white chalk paint, and I'm going to paint in between that square, and it'll probably take 2 or 3 coats to get it covered really well. If you're interested in me doing one of these custom graphics for you with your last name and a year on them, I do have it listed in my Etsy store, so you can head over there and check it out, and I can custom make you one. Now this is completely dried, and I'm just going to peel away that painter's tape, and I'm left with a perfect square. And this is a graphic that I'm going to use on my milk can, and I think it's the perfect graphic at a front door. And again, I've put this in my Word program, sized it to the size that I want it, printed it off on my LaserJet printer on regular computer paper, and I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat, and I'm going to put it right in that painted square, and then I'm going to flip it over after I've got all the Mod Podge on, get all the wrinkles and bubbles out of it, and then I'm going to let it sit overnight and dry really well before I rub off the paper, and the graphics will be left on my milk can. Okay, everything is completely dried. I'm taking a rag, just dampening it so you can start to see the graphics through,
Done.
and then rubbing off all of that paper.
Done.
Now I wanted to show
9
you, sometimes
rows,
not all the graphics turn out
5
perfect.
feet long.
I was rubbing this and a little piece of the G kind of rubbed away. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add a little bit of Mod Podge right on that black ink of where it rubbed off, and then press it down exactly where it goes on that graphic and line it up really well. And then I'm going to set it aside and let it dry really thoroughly, and it should fix itself and have that black ink transfer back onto that graphic on my milk can. I just wanted to show you that not every graphic that I do turns out perfect, and it takes a little bit of patience and a little bit of practice to get the hang of it. And even with me doing these graphics for a lot of years, I still have some that don't turn out perfect. But I love the way that this one turned out. It just kind of gives it that farmhouse feel and kind of rustic look. I'm going to seal this milk can with some polyacrylic sealer outdoor. You want to make sure if this is going to be outside in the elements, you're using an outdoor formula to make sure that it's sealed really well. I'm so glad I finally got around to kind of sprucing this milk can up. It's been sitting at my front door and it's kind of looked dingy, and it's one of those projects that I never really got around to doing, but I love it now and I can't wait to get it at my front door. Love the graphic also.
Alright guys, I'm going to log off. I'm going to take a quick breather, quick, refreshments and everything. And if by chance I get a chance to come back, I will get back to you guys again. And I will be starting another scarf. As you guys see over here, I'm not shy in showing you guys. I have a whole bunch of scarfist materials and a whole bunch of stored ups too. But anyway, these are readily available. So, God willing, after I powder my nose and get nice, whatever. Look, I'm sweating like a fat pig, okay? These lights are no joke. I don't know how Bollywood and Hollywood do this crap. And I've always had a big head. And yes, I am approaching 50 years old. And yes, I am older. I don't care if they say I'm old. Oh, she's so old. Who cares? Anyway, stay hip, stay awesome, stay great, stay trying, stay doing your best, stay avoiding the haters. See you soon.